I didn't actually drive into it, but it looks like it's in a really interesting spot. And I think we could still use some, well, it looks like you're in the country. Never mind, God, hecklers. So that's, we do have volunteers, but if there are others that would like to come, it's from 5 to 8, again, at Queen Anne Parks, and is to former President Ben Franklin, many hands raise all votes. So feel free to show up. Okay, that went over not today. Lvl Home Expo Show, May 15th. I think we're still looking to fill some time slots there for volunteers. And Kathy has sent out a sign-up sheet on a Paul Harris reception, May 13th. Beth, would you like to give a quick update here at the microphone?
So we've had 25
at the microphone.
It is the 13th, is that Thursday? Yes. Okay.
You set it up.
I know, but I can't remember. I got other things on my mind. Good morning. May 13th, only 25 people have signed up so far. So please come. It's going to be a really nice evening. It's going to be heavy appetizers. There's a little light entertainment, which will be very funny, and there will be awards for the light entertainment. But come out and honor your Rotarians and learn about the foundation. So please sign up because the deadline is like in a couple of, on the 1st. So I'm probably going to go around to each table and beg. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Beth, and for your continued passion in that regard. Yes, to reiterate, May 1st is the last day to RSVP because brackets has to get their order in for food. Shannon, did you have a quick announcement that you'd like to make?
Yes, at the podium.
Please, at the podium.
Good morning. I just want to talk about the Lvl Public Safety Foundation. We have our golf tournament on June 21st here at Brackets. And then we also have our bourbon and cigars event at the Red Fox on June 23rd. You can find both of them on our website. We'd love to have you guys join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. And thank you all for allowing us to kind of rush through the announcements so that we could get to our program. Once again, Michael Baumann has a tight schedule, so Judy will be here, but Michael is joining us via Zoom. And please welcome Michael Baumann.
Well, good morning, all. I hope, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Well, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning and talk about some of the things that are going on in Lakeville area schools. But before I dive into a generalized update, trying to cover a lot of ground, I'm hopefully going to focus on the things that are most interesting to all of you or most concerning to all of you. But I want to start by just sharing a few things that I think are relevant to being a Rotarian and that we can all relate to. A lot of times people have asked me, how you're doing and how are things going, those kinds of questions. And I'm very appreciative of all the folks that have checked in with me and shared their concerns for some of the difficulties. One of the things I think many of us know, and I know plenty of you in this room have been in leadership roles in your professional lives and can understand this. But one of the things that really resonates with me in times of adversity and significant difficulty, which I would classify this pandemic, at least in the public education sphere of the state of Minnesota, as extremely challenging and difficult. One of the things that I have to lean on and know, and I think any leader in any difficult situation needs to know who they are. And they need to really know their own character and understand that you're going to be in the face of very difficult decisions and choices, and you're going to have to make them or you wither under the pressure. Those are really the only things that are going to happen. And so one of the things I know about myself is that in the very end of the analysis of all the difficulties that you face in leadership, you better have principles. So I want to just share some thinking I have around some of the decisions that I've had to make, and some of the things you'll see in this presentation that I think address this. And first of all, in the four-way test, if you apply the four-way test to your decision making, I think it's a good process to make some decisions that are very difficult. And the first question that is asked in the four-way test is it the truth? As a leader, as a person, I don't believe in the relativity of truth. I think there is a truth, and I try to know and determine what that truth is. And from everything else below the first question of the four-way test, that becomes more difficult to ascertain. But is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? I can tell you I've had to make decisions that are not fair to all concerned. And that's a very, very lonely place to be. But you try to be as fair as you can to the most that are impacted. And will it build goodwill and better friendships? That one's even more difficult. When you're trying to navigate a community, are you building goodwill? And are you making better friendships? I can tell you, I may have failed in that manner in some places, because there are very legitimate arguments about decisions that have to be made. And one of the things I tell my staff is we have to choose between several cups of poison. Which one do you want to drink today? And then finally, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And that's another one that's very difficult, because some of the decisions we have to make, or I have had to make, I don't want to put it out on anybody else, is you'll make a decision that may not be beneficial to all, but you have to try to be making decisions that are beneficial to most and do the least harm. So that's one thing. I have others that I apply, but I just wanted to share the context of what it is to be a Rotarian and to be a superintendent in these times, and how I apply that as I'm trying to make some very difficult decisions that we'll share now. One of the more difficult things that are going on in our school district right now is trying to figure out how do we set a condition beyond the pandemic, beyond the changing of learning models, and beyond the stress that is occurring in our community with regard to what I would consider a political atmosphere around COVID-19. And we have a referendum because this COVID-19 is going to end in the sense that we're going to overcome it as a community, as a state, and as a nation. I have no doubts. And as we come out of that time frame and the issues associated with the pandemic, Lakeville area schools is going to grow, and it's going to grow in a manner that I think Dr. Wallstrom, who's in the room, had to manage and navigate as our superintendent years ago. We're kind of back in that, similarly in that kind of time frame, maybe not quite as rapid a growth, but a growth nonetheless. So I want to share with you what's going on with our referendum. I want to talk about our equity work in our school district and be real clear about what we are trying to do and what we are not trying to do. And hopefully you can understand better what's going on with that, and see where the distinction or the differences are with regard to our work in that area. And then what's the COVID-19 situation awareness that I want to share with everybody, and give you an update on where we are with that, as there's much talk in the community about recent things that I've had to address. So let's just start first with a little bit about our referendum. What are we trying to do? What do we need, and why are we doing that? What we're doing is asking our community to give us about $44 million through property taxation to build a 9th elementary school. And we're going to need a 9th elementary school in our system in order to handle the 1,000 more students we're going to have over 5 years. And I'll show you those numbers here in a minute. In order to get a school built and open, to defray the situation, we are on a timeline to open a school in 2024. It takes that long to do the land acquisition and design and build a school and open those doors. So we've waited till the very latest opportunity. There was much debate internal to our organization about when to ask for this, knowing we were in a pandemic scenario that has a lot of anxiety, frustration among our community. Yeah, I think it's true for our state and for sure across our country. So the city of Lakeville, just so you know, is permitting residential property at a very high rate. There's been more than 1,700 new homes and townhome apartment buildings that have been approved in Lakeville, and we think this trend is expected to continue. I know that our city administrator, Justin Miller, he and his staff work with us and make sure we're informed of what's going on, and we're trying to look deep at what the situation is for our school district so we can use that data to also inform our projections on enrollment. We do see a growth projected in Lakeville, Elko, New Market, Credit River, and we don't have the data for Credit River or Burnsville, which we have a small portion of Burnsville that is part of the Lakeville area schools, but we're seeing growth, a projected growth of 13,000 new residents over the next decade in those areas. So that's concerning. That's something we have to respond to as a school system that's supporting families that are moving into this area. So this is our projection out to 2029, 2030 school year for enrollment. And we do depict there a slight downturn in enrollment for this school year. That's indicative of the influence of COVID. Our school district realized at first a 2% decline in enrollment. We're actually at 11,330 students now. So we actually brought students back into the system and or moved into the system. So we didn't realize as much of a drop as we had projected ultimately. I will say that in comparison to the state of Minnesota, where the average school district lost 18%, we've done extremely well. As you look at it in comparison, because the pandemic is going to have an impact on your enrollment. So if we look out to 2030, we're going to be a school system that's gone from right around 11,000 in 2015 all the way to 14,000 in 2030. That growth within our elementary is 1,000 more students in the next 5 years. So by 2025, we're going to have 5,634 elementary students in our system. That is a very difficult number of students to absorb given our current learning space. And I am very, very concerned about how are we going to provide the best learning environments for our students. They will be back in the buildings. The pandemic will end. We will have to deal with that as a school system. To build this facility and get the land to put the school on, we're estimating $4 per month on a median value home in the Lakeville area school system of $400,000. We also know that with that growth in our population and those coming in, that our net tax capacity increase, and over time on a fixed bond for this referendum, we expect that the cost to our taxpayers on this particular bond would over time actually go down. If we don't have success with this referendum, this is the reality of what I will have to mitigate in our system. You know that we have additions going on in 5 of our 8 elementary schools that will be online by this fall, and that's going to help us in the near term. But by 2023, we won't have capacity for 148 students, and by 2025, we won't have capacity in our elementaries for 534 students. With the average size of our elementaries filled at 600, 534 is a whole nother school by 2025. And so these are our concerns and why we think we have to ask for a school on a 3-year build timeline now. So some other things that I do see and will be mitigation strategies that we'll have to put into effect is, one is we're going to have to increase class sizes if we don't have a building that will assimilate these expected students. We will have to make program changes. Some of the things that we've already done before we went to doing additions on our buildings is we converted some space that was not designed for classroom into classroom space. And we will have to do that with more of our facilities or in our elementaries for sure. And then I think we will have to do some boundary shifting earlier than if we did it in correlation with the opening of a new elementary school. And that's in order to try to cross-level some of the concentration issues that we have with our current boundaries and our school enrollments. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of what's going on and what the second and third order effects can be with regard to this particular referendum. I also am keenly aware that many are viewing this particular referendum in the near term. The school district's not doing what we want them to do, and I appreciate that. And this could be a referendum on COVID and how that's been managed in the school district, and that's a fair indictment. But I also think that if we remain focused on the near term and not on the long term, we will have some significant challenges in our school system. And it's not that we can't recover or that we can't figure out how to mitigate the impact, but it is a very, very difficult situation, especially when you're talking about elementary. And we've made some deliberate efforts as a school system to have class sizes managed tightly in our elementary to keep those class sizes at a reasonable low level in our system for learning purposes. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of the longer term picture as we look at the situation that we're dealing with. Just to share voting information, we are doing in person here at the district office. And so there's not any voting at City Hall. We're doing it all here right out of the facility here on Juniper Path. Mail-in ballots have to be in by May 11th, which is rapidly approaching. That is election day. We will have all our normal polling facilities available and the time 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And you can go online to isd194.org/growingtogether to find where your polling site is if you need to do that or any other voting information. There's also a lot more, there's a toolbox, there's frequently asked questions in there that could help you better understand the referendum and what this ask is for our community. And if you want to just call in to offer anything, 952-232-2076 is where you could leave a voice message for us. So I want to transition to talk about our equity work and hopefully help everybody understand better what's exactly Lakeville's position on equity and why we're doing equity work. There's two things I think I don't have on this chart, but I want to make sure everybody's aware of who has interest in this particular area. First of all, I would encourage you to go online and look at the governor's public education plan for the state of Minnesota. It's a plan called Due North, and he has some very definitive thinking and plans for what our school systems across the state of Minnesota will have in them. Everything from impacts on school finance to curriculum with respect to equity. Again, that is the governor's Due North plan for school districts. For the other thing I would encourage you to do is go to the Association of Metropolitan School Districts, or AMSD. You can Google AMSD Minnesota and look at their Reimagine Minnesota work that's been going on. Lakeville Area Schools has been a member of AMSD for over 15 years, maybe 20 years or longer. And there's about 40 school districts in the metro area that are members of the Association of Minnesota School Districts. And look at Reimagine Minnesota, if you can remember that or write that down. That has some influence on the school systems that are members in that association. But for us, starting with our mission statement, that we're trying to ensure success for each and every student, personally, socially, academically, and civically. And that has a lot of tentacles to it, especially when you're talking about social and civic responsibilities and knowledge transfer that we think is part of the learning process for our students. The other thing I think is really important to understand is, first of all, when you look at the state of Minnesota in comparison to the rest of the country with regards to the achievement gap, which is has different terminology around it, the learning gap, whatever you may have heard out there. Minnesota has the widest achievement gap for Black males in the country. For Lakeville, we do have an identified learning gap, both in reading and math for our students of color. And we recognize this gap, and we want to continue to do work in order to close this gap for our students of color. And we do think that there are some systemic elements to that. One of the, I think, biggest challenges with regard to talking about systemic issues is we have for many, many years been involved in a continuous improvement process around many parts of our system. And I think anybody who's ever been a leader in any organization knows that you're in a constant process of doing assessments of your systems and looking at where there are shortfalls and working in collaborative team manner to improve those systems. We're not any different in this organization, and we have not found the right balance and the right fidelity with our systems with regard to our students of color in the achievement of academic progress. And so we have an obligation to work diligently and put some effort into identifying exactly what those challenges are and trying to improve there. And I think that out of just respect and the dignity and humanity of every student, the first word in public education is public. And when you are part of a system that has to open its doors to all of the public under the laws of the state and the constitution of the state in which you operate. All means all, and we don't have the opportunity to distinguish broadly around that particular issue. We are a public entity, and we should want to do all we can to honor the dignity and humanity of every student. And that's a very difficult thing in some cases because beliefs get challenged. And again, I'll just go back to the four-way test and apply what it is that we're trying to do with regard to all of our students. And then we have to affirm our students and our families. And I've taken a lot of time to talk to many of our families who are of different culture backgrounds and try to talk to leaders in those groups to understand what their concerns are and what's going on in their view of being a citizen or being a person here in our community in Lakeville and our Lakeville area schools neighborhoods. And I think it's important to listen and learn and try to do all we can to be support for them, be helpful, and create learning environments that their students can feel comfortable in. And we're very committed to trying to do better at that by listening and learning and making some system adjustments. What we're not doing is we're not indoctrinating kids on the ideologies of race-based political people. That does not have our interest or effort. We're not endorsing political groups or anybody who's seditious to the United States of America or have ideologies of anti-Americanism. We are not teaching critical race theory. But on that point, I want to also make sure everybody is aware that the state is doing a review of its social studies standards in its curriculum. And right now, I am informed that critical race theory is in that standard. And I want everybody to be aware that that's a process. And if it remains a standard, essentially what will occur is the school districts across the state of Minnesota, every public education K-12 will have that as a standard. So I think there's opportunity here to talk to your legislators and to the Minnesota Department of Education or about this particular issue if you have concerns. We are not fomenting protests. And to that issue, we did have, first of all, I want to just be clear that when kids are called to walk out or they are in some manner, somebody initiates a protest. It is not the school district who's initiating any of these things. What we have to do is respond to those. And the most recent issue that occurred was Minnesota Teens or hashtag Minnesota Teens did a call to a walkout for all high school students in the state of Minnesota. What we were faced with was how do we respond to that? And I'm just gonna be clear that as a superintendent, my first concern is our student safety. And I don't want to escalate and create confrontation in the system that's going to disrupt the learning environment for hours on end. So right or wrong, my choice was to give the students some space. I didn't want them hopping in their cars at noon or during the lunch hour and running off to one of our parks and doing some sort of protest or demonstration, and students being in the high school age, confrontation could quickly ensue, and then we could have other issues going on, and I don't want to speculate on what they are. My thinking was give them the space. We didn't give them an hour, we gave them a half hour. Teachers were not involved. I did have administrative non-teaching staff out around those buildings to make sure those students were safe. and then get them back to school or into class over a 30-minute period of time. Of the potential of a couple thousand students protesting, we had maybe 200, and it was kept to a half hour. They did what they wanted to do, and they went back to class. And so I just want people to know that we weren't trying to instigate a protest, nor were we trying to advocate for whatever message the protest might have, but give our students some space to express themselves and move on. Yes, there are other things that occur with that that are not necessarily good. People get bullied, or they get messaged to participate, things like that. But in the grander scheme of things, keeping our students safe and keeping those confrontations and de-escalate, I think, made more sense. And I acknowledge that many may disagree with me on that matter. Endorsing a message is not what we were trying or intending to do. And then finally, we're not supporting the politicization, that's a fun word, of our classrooms. We're trying to do quite the opposite. We're trying to set conditions to give our teachers some more guidance. We passed a policy called 630, is how to deal with controversial subjects in the classroom. Because let's all just be clear about one thing. When the situation with George Floyd occurred, social media erupts, the internet erupts, the news media erupts. Our kids are getting that information. They're going to ask questions. The most important thing I think we can do is give our teachers the direction and the guidance to be able to facilitate those conversations, because they're going to happen. I think our parents are the most important teachers of our kids, and first and foremost, their concerns should be what our kids are hearing and learning. But we'll have to deal with it in our classrooms, because it's the nature of our society. The contemporary operating environment is not the same one that all of you went to high school with. And I know there's some of you in the group that are far younger than I, and most of you are not older than me. No, I'm kidding. My point is it's different, and it's generational, and we can't be in a position to think that the consumption of information and the provision of information is solely in the classroom. But if we don't help our kids with some of their questions and concerns and give them some good facilitation in discussing multiple sides of an issue, then I think we're going to be in a different place. And so hopefully that makes some sense. And it's not about being political and offering our political position. It's about facilitating and helping our students be critical thinkers and be responsible around the information that they're consuming in many other manner than we have control over. So that's a little bit of background on that. So now I want to just shift the gear one more time and talk about what's going on in Lakeville with respect to COVID. And COVID's a very, very difficult challenge because it has many, many pieces to it. And we'll just start with the policy piece. The policy of the state of Minnesota is public health and safety first, and everything else is subordinated to that. Many people disagree with that approach, but that approach is what the state of Minnesota under the current executive has chosen to do. And so that has an impact on school districts across the system in multiple ways. And the shifts that we've had to deal with in learning models were initially tied to what the counts were with regard to county cases. That hasn't really disappeared in the guidance that we get from the Minnesota Department of Health and Minnesota Department of Education here in the school system. That still has resonance with the public health people that are giving us direction and guidance. right now in Lakeville, these charts that I'm sharing with you, and I don't know how easily you can see the numbers, but on the far left of the chart on your left is a representation of where we are with positive case rates in Dakota County, and Lakeville has the highest case rate right now of positive in Lakeville. Now, if you're of the mind that COVID's not a big deal, it's not an issue, it's not the threat that that maybe some have created with regard to this, then you're going to look at that and maybe shrug your shoulders a little bit, and I don't dispute that. But that's not the system of governance that school districts can operate under. Again, the assumption and the policy is that there's a public health crisis, a pandemic of COVID-19, and we have to do what we're required to do in order to contain and reduce the transmission. If you look at the chart on the right, the second bar from your left is also Lakeville, and that's the per capita rate of cities in Dakota County. And so Lakeville is second to West St. Paul. These transmission rates are the highest we've had since we've been in this this COVID scenario as a school district or as a state. And so this is concerning. And driving some of the direction and guidance that we get from the public health officials in the state of Minnesota. Within our school district, if you look at the far right, you'll see April 5th through April 25th, the weeks, those 3 weeks, and the blue are students and the red are staff, and these are positive cases in our schools. Not necessarily transmitted within our schools, but students who have we have record of as positive. Now we are stepping down, which is the right direction with regard to trying to contain the virus transmission, but it's still the highest we've had in our school system since June or January 4th. Looking that far back. So these were my concerns. First of all, that Lakeville has an unusually high transmission rate for this part of the metro. And I get a lot of critique about the fact that other school districts aren't doing what we're doing, but other cities within Dakota County aren't experiencing the same level of transmission that we are either. COVID positive case rates in schools are high, and they are causing significant disruption. And why is that disruption occurring? It's occurring because of quarantine. We're the only school district that tried to bring in our students in person 5 days a week. There are other school districts who brought their students in under a hybrid model 4 days a week. That is a significant difference in the application of the quarantine process that we are given and have to apply in our school district. The challenge we have is there are two shortened methods of determination of quarantine. There's a 10-day and a 7-day, but in both cases, the balance of 14 days of quarantine have to be met with 6 feet of distance or social distancing between students upon return. So take, for example, a 7-day quarantine is possible with a negative PCR test if I can bring the students back and put them in 6 feet of social distancing. I cannot do that with an all-in-person scenario in our school system because I don't have the learning space to do that. Therefore, the 14-day quarantine is what we have to apply. And I think that's definitely frustrated and angered many parents, and justifiably so. And the anger comes from a very legitimate unintended consequence. And that is the idea of we are punishing students who do what they're asked to do. They're wearing their mask, they're staying they're trying to keep as much social distance as possible, and they're doing all the right things, and they get punished because they had 15 minutes of cumulative time inside of 6 feet around somebody who didn't follow that, or became symptomatic, or came to school with a positive situation with COVID. And again, I fully understand the unfairness of that. But I can't contain and comply with the state directives around this and do apply that fairly. So that's the dilemma, and I acknowledge it. Seniors are coming up on graduation, and from all of my past experience, the seniors having the opportunity to walk is a very important life event. Maybe more important for mom and dad, or a guardian of a young person who's now going to graduate, than even the student. So my thinking was to preserve that opportunity and optimize it for as many students as possible. In the feedback that I've gotten, I'm learning that that's less important to our students and maybe to our parents. And so we may have to, what we were looking to do was put our students in DL, our senior class in distance learning, so that they wouldn't be exposed or have a transmission in our schools, and be able to walk. We're also trying to facilitate vaccination. And I just want to be clear about one thing. I am not requiring mandatory anything, nor do I want to create a condition, which is also very concerning, that if somebody's not vaccinated, they're going to lose out on something. All I'm trying to do is optimize the opportunity and the choices for each and every family around the opportunity to have a vaccine if they feel a vaccine and access to a vaccine is something they haven't been able to accomplish before graduation occurs. A lot of people are saying that we're requiring vaccinations. We're not requiring them. Some people are saying that facilitating them is advocating for vaccination. There's nobody in the school system advocating for vaccination if it's not an individual choice. But if it is an individual choice, then I have to do what I can to facilitate the opportunity for students who may not have transportation or opportunity to get a vaccine, to set a condition for them to be able to do that. Doing nothing more or less than that. I do think that having our students walk is an important life event, and something that we weren't able to do with the whole class last year or last graduation because of COVID. We did try to create a scenario or an opportunity for them to walk, but it wasn't the same as being with your whole class. So that's what we're trying to preserve, and I will consider what the feedback is that I have, and we have time to make changes with that, and we are under review of that with my staff. But the options and the opportunity here is we're trying to mitigate through containment methods and vaccination support, not vaccination requirements of any kind, if families want to exercise that opportunity. So hopefully that makes some sense and doesn't have any kind of draconian or dictatorial element to it. So what we did recently put out was that middle school, we were going to extend the distance learning to May 7th. And that's part of trying to contain the transmission given the rates that we're at right now, because it has worked for us in the past. And it is consistent with what I believe that the state guidance is with where we are in this current situation of the pandemic as it pertains to the Lakeville area schools. We want to return in person on May 10th. We will have to continue to do contact tracing and quarantine requirements and carry those out. And we still have the Link 12 option for our middle school students for distance learning. In the high school, we wanted to continue to remain in person. because we have the ability to do simultaneous teaching and learning processes. So by that simply means students can be in class and they can be online, and we can deliver to our students together at the same time, and they can continue with their education. So that having that choice for families to be able to exercise, I think allows us to remain in person under the current circumstances. The graduation opportunity being a critical concern, we want to make sure that the contact tracing and the quarantine to the greatest extent and ability preserves that opportunity for them to walk. And we wanted to also move our students again to distance learning that are seniors, in order to put that time of more than 14 days in place, so that on June 10th they could walk. Again, the feedback has been pretty resounding so far that they don't want that, and their parents don't want that. So we'll reassess that as a staff team and try to figure out if there's a way to accommodate what their desires are. It may reduce the number of students that can walk, and that'll just have to be the way things progress. My hope is not, and we'll try to reassess all of those decisions for the benefit of what our community wants. So that's what I wanted to share and update with everybody. I hope I was not trying to offend anybody in any particular way. These are difficult times, difficult decisions, and I'm just asking for any more feedback that anybody would have with regard to this, and hopefully we'll be able to finish out the year. I'm doing everything I can to try not to change a learning model anymore, but the situation is no easy day for anybody in our school system. So thank you for your kind attention, and I guess I'll take some questions.
Like he's on the Apollo 11.
Testing 1, 2.
Michael, can you hear us now?
Barely, but go ahead. I'll my ears are aging faster than the rest of me.
All right, we're gonna go to questions. So does anybody have a question? Oh,
Michael, can you hear me? Cody Rodwell.
I can hear you.
Okay, great. My first question is, you're kind of under the thumb of the edicts of the state right now regarding masking in the schools. So has the state provided any data at all that shows, we are getting spread within the school systems, either student to student, student to teacher, or any studies that show that masking prevents that transmission within the schools? Has the state provided any data at the local, regional, or state level to, basically validate these masks on these kids? Because I know a lot of other school districts, we're kind of in an island here of masking. North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, Wisconsin, they all have school districts, that I've researched this past week that are open 5 days in person, kids optional masks. So has the state provided you any data that masking is effective on our children, as young as first grade inside of our school district?
Thank you for the question. The short answer is no. We have asked. We've done several things as superintendents from early on in this process. We've clamored for the opportunity to, either through an advisory or through a direct communication with the governor, an opportunity to have input to the learning model shifts, to masking, all those things. Recently, North Dakota's governor sent or made a decision and articulated that decision with respect to quarantine, where students who are masked and are in that I call it the bubble, the 6-foot bubble, for 15 cumulative minutes. If you're masked, you're not considered a candidate for assessment for quarantine, because it belies the fact that the mask is supposed to be protective. So they did that in North Dakota. I know in other school systems in other states that they've relaxed those requirements. We are under the executive order to mask. I don't get a vote in that matter. As I know many of you don't get a vote in that matter other than your own behavior. And then it becomes the challenge of not yourself, but service over self, to be able to say, I need to protect the person next to me, not so much myself. And so if somebody thinks that that's protection, then that's what it is. As a superintendent and as a school system, I don't have the luxury of just telling people to unmask, because we are under executive order, to my knowledge, around that. No research has been provided, but requests have been made. And I guess in the restaurant term, it's been 86'd.
Thanks.
Michael, Bob Bayer here.
Hi,
Good
Bob.
morning.
Morning.
One of the slides you showed there, first of all, I think the job you're doing is fantastic through all this. Takes a lot of navigation. One of the slides you showed was something to the effect of not endorsing any political groups. So can you explain to me how the Black Lives Matters posters are infiltrating the schools right now?
Well, they're not infiltrating. Infiltration suggests that there's some sort of untransparent method about that. And maybe that's how people feel. And maybe the answer to this, Bob, will be a distinction without a difference for many who are looking at Black Lives Matter in the one dimension of a seditious organization that has a political view about the United States of America. But there's also another problem that I think we have to be considerate of, and there are Black families in our community, many who look at not affirming them by not saying, if you can look a Black man or Black woman in the eye and say your life doesn't matter, that's a challenge as well. That's a difficult situation for anybody. What I didn't want was in our system advocacy posters, et cetera, that would say things like Black Lives Matter, defund the police. Black Lives Matter, end America. That's the kind of stuff that's out there. And that's the kind of stuff that I think sets people on edge and, frankly, gets them angry. The other side of it is there a concept of just telling and advocating that somebody's humanity, somebody who is a Black person is somebody that we care for and affirm. So our approach, we did go to some advisory groups. We went to students. We wanted to deal with the issue of affirming our Black students within our system. And if you look at what we came up with, none of that has the nefarious and seditious support for the organization called Black Lives Matter. The other thing I did is I looked at how the Trump administration managed this particular issue, and whether federal employees could advocate for Black Lives Matter. And the answer was you cannot advocate for Black Lives Matter, the political organization, but you can advocate for Black Lives Matter. So I understand that many will consider that not a distinction with a difference, or that the subtlety of it is not clear enough. But I also have a concern about the confrontation, the lack of affirmation, and dealing with all of our students that are in our system. So that's the approach that we feel is is warranted. I also think that you're not going to have all those posters in all the classrooms, but our teachers asked for how can we advocate, how can we put these posters up, and those posters that were being asked for and requested, the answer was no, because they are politicized. So that's the best answer I can give you, Bob. You may not accept that, or others may not accept it, but that's the road we're trying to navigate.
So thank you, everybody. We're gonna end questions now. I know Michael has another meeting he needs to hop to.